As darkness slowly settles in, you may feel your body finally finding rest after a long, tiring day. But if you listen a little more deeply, you will realize that your mind has not truly stopped. It has simply shifted into another state, quieter, deeper, and more truthful. In Carl Jung's view, the moment you fall asleep is not the shutting down of consciousness, but the moment the unconscious begins to speak. It does not speak in words, but through dreams, through vague emotions, through images that are difficult to explain, yet touch the deepest part of you. The core value does not lie only in surrendering to sleep and letting the unconscious work on its own, but also in the attitude you bring when facing the subtle shifts within yourself. You need to understand that not every inner transformation needs to be expressed or made public right away. There are sacred things that need to be protected in complete stillness, so they have enough time to take root deeply in your psyche and become steady before stepping into the light of awareness. For that reason, tonight, you do not need to try to analyze or understand everything. Simply listen to your own breath, let go of all burdens, and allow yourself to sink into sleep. Cherish and keep to yourself the quiet truths that will slowly reveal themselves in the silence of the night. 1. Night and sleep. A doorway into the unconscious. Night is not only when the outer world grows quiet, but also the moment another world begins to speak. And you may have felt this in your own way, lying still in the dark, your body tired but your mind unwilling to sleep, as if something within you is waiting to be heard. During the day, you are used to keeping everything under control. You know what to say, how to respond, who you need to be in each situation, and you do it long enough that it becomes natural, to the point where you sometimes forget which part is what you truly feel and which part is what you are simply doing the right way. From Carl Jung's perspective, the day belongs to consciousness, where you operate through logic, norms, and social roles. At the same time, at night, as that layer of control loosens, the unconscious begins to come forward, not loudly, not forcefully, but clearly enough if you are quiet enough to notice. A thought recorded in his work expresses this. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And this explains why there are nights when you cannot fall asleep right away, not because you are not tired enough, but because something within you has not yet been seen. You may recognize this through familiar moments. When you lie down, turn off the lights, everything becomes quiet, and suddenly, thoughts you did not have time to touch during the day return. Perhaps a conversation left unfinished, a feeling you tried to ignore, or just a vague sense that something is missing in your life that you cannot yet name. During the day, you answer emails, take care of others, complete your work, and maintain a stable image. But at night, when no one needs you to be a specific version of yourself, you begin to return closer to the part that is not defined. Imagine your inner world as a sky full of stars, yet during the day, you see almost nothing but a familiar brightness where everything appears clear, reasonable, and easy to control. The daylight makes you believe the sky is simply that, empty and easy to understand. But in truth, all the stars are always there. You just cannot see them under such strong light. And when night falls, when the light softens, the sky begins to change. The stars appear, not loudly, not suddenly, but enough for you to realize that there has always been a depth above you that you could not see during the day. Your inner world works the same way. When you sleep, when the conscious ego no longer occupies all the space, the hidden parts begin to appear, not because they have just come into existence, but because you are finally able to see them. And in that space, the unconscious begins its work, connecting, organizing, and sometimes healing what you did not have time to touch during the day. In modern life, this becomes even more evident because you live in a rhythm that does not allow you to pause long enough to listen to yourself. You may spend the whole day handling tasks, replying to messages, keeping up with expectations, and at night, you still feel the need to do something, to open a video, scroll through your phone, listen to a podcast, as if silence itself is uncomfortable. But the truth is, you are not afraid of silence. You are afraid of what may appear within it. And that is why the night becomes such a special space, because no matter how much you try to fill it with noise, there will still be moments when you cannot avoid facing yourself. What matters is not that you must understand everything happening inside you right then, but that you begin to recognize those subtle movements are not problems to eliminate, but signals to be heard. When you sleep, the conscious ego steps back, no longer holding the central role, and the unconscious begins its work, connecting scattered memories, processing unnamed emotions, and sometimes offering images that appear in your dreams as a way of telling you what you did not have time to hear during the day. You may have had dreams that felt incredibly real, as if they touched something deep within you, but the next morning, you quickly move on, return to your routine, and think of them as meaningless. But seen this way, dreams are not random. They are a language, a way the unconscious communicates when consciousness no longer interferes too much. And this opens a very different perspective on the night, that it is not an empty gap between 2 days, but a passage where the deeper parts of you are allowed to move, connect, and change. You do not need to do anything special to begin. You do not need to analyze every dream. You do not need to understand everything right away. Just allow yourself to remain in that stillness a little longer, without rushing to fill it, without rushing to escape it. Perhaps, simply by listening without judgment, you will realize that there is always a part within you trying to bring you closer to yourself, and sleep is the softest doorway into that journey. And if you continue to stay with yourself in this way, you may begin to notice that what you once thought were just passing feelings are actually guided by a deeper part you have never truly seen. And that part does not disappear. It is simply waiting until you are ready to face it. If you want to understand what within you is still quietly influencing every choice, every emotion, and even the things you call coincidence, keep listening, because the door that has just opened is only the beginning. 2. The shadow, the rejected part still controlling you. You may have experienced this before, when you suddenly feel irritated over something very small, or when you react strongly to someone simply because they have a trait you do not like. In Carl Jung's view, this part has a clear name, the shadow, not something foreign, but the collection of everything you have not allowed yourself to be, the emotions you were taught to suppress, the desires you believed were wrong, the parts of yourself you had to hide to be accepted, to be loved, or simply to avoid being hurt. The shadow is not only made of negative qualities like anger, jealousy, selfishness, or weakness, it also contains parts that are deeply alive and real, but do not fit the image you have learned to maintain, such as the desire to grow, the need for attention, the wish to be prioritized, a deep sensitivity, or even the longing to live a life different from the one you are living. And because these parts once made you feel unsafe to express, you learn to push them down, quietly, skillfully. But what many people do not realize is this: what is pushed down does not disappear. It only changes the way it shows up. and sometimes it returns in forms you do not recognize as your own, like recurring thoughts, familiar reactions, or discomfort you keep blaming on circumstances. My friend Lily once shared her story with me when she began to feel exhausted by her own reactions. She was the kind of person everyone saw as easygoing, always listening, always supportive, always calm. Yet in very small, unexpected moments, she would explode, not with strangers, but with the people closest to her. And afterward, she would feel guilty, as if there was a part of her she could not control. When Lily shared this, she did not talk much about anger. She talked about exhaustion, the exhaustion of always being the stable one, always understanding others. And through a Jungian lens, you can see that her shadow was not just anger, but all the parts she never allowed herself to live, the part that wanted to be prioritized, to say no, to express needs without feeling selfish. If you hear Lily's story and recognize a part of yourself in it, share your story below, because your story might help someone else realize they are not alone in this journey. Her anger was not the problem, but a signal, a way for the shadow to rise to the surface. Because as one deep idea in Jung's thought suggests, everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. When the shadow is not recognized, it does not weaken. It becomes stronger, denser, and harder to control. In modern life, this appears very often. You may see it when someone always tries to stay positive, but is easily triggered by small things. When someone insists they need nothing, yet feels hurt when ignored. When you notice that the traits you judge most harshly in others are the very traits you do not allow in yourself, like feeling irritated by someone who is too confident, too visible, too selfish, while deep inside, a part of you may long to live that freely. In that sense, the shadow is not an enemy, but a forgotten part. And the issue is not whether you have a shadow, because everyone does, but whether you recognize it. Because if you do not see it, you will keep living in a loop where you think you are choosing, but you are reacting, where you think you understand yourself, but you are only living with the part you allow yourself to see. You do not need to change immediately, but perhaps the first step, and also the hardest, is to allow yourself to admit that there are parts of you you do not fully know, parts that are not perfect, not beautiful, not aligned with the image you have built, but deeply real and alive. And when these parts are seen, they do not make you worse, they make you more whole. Because growth, in Jung's view, is not about removing the dark, but about bringing it into the light, not to erase it, but so it no longer controls you from behind. And as you begin to do this, gently, slowly, you may find that reactions that once confused you start to make sense. Emotions that once frightened you begin to feel meaningful, and you begin to have a more honest relationship with yourself. The next part will touch on how the shadow speaks to you each night, in a way you may have ignored for far too long, and you may begin to see your dreams differently after hearing it. 3. Dreams are the language of healing and restructuring. Have you ever wondered whether your dreams are trying to tell you something, or do you simply see them as strange, fragmented images, then quickly forget them when you wake, as if they carried no meaning worth keeping, even though some dreams leave you with a feeling that is vivid and deeply real? You may remember that feeling more clearly than the dream itself, the feeling of being lost in a long hallway, or standing before a door that will not open, or meeting a younger version of yourself. And even if you do not understand exactly what is happening, you still feel a strange familiarity, as if the dream did not come from outside you, but from a place very deep within. In Carl Jung's approach, dreams are not random, nor are they meaningless products of the brain at rest, but a language, a way the unconscious uses to communicate with you when consciousness no longer occupies the whole space. What matters here is that the unconscious does not speak in direct reasoning. It does not use straightforward words, but speaks through symbols, images, and situations that are more emotional than logical. You can imagine a dream as a letter written in a language you have never learned, yet you can still feel its meaning through the emotion it carries. A house with many rooms may not simply be a house, but the structure of your inner world, where there are rooms you visit often, and also doors you locked long ago. A door that will not open may not be a random detail, but the image of an emotional place you are not yet ready to touch. A child appearing in a dream may not simply be a memory, but a former self still waiting to be seen, understood, and healed. What is beautiful about dreams is that they do not require you to understand them immediately, because their main function is not to provide clear answers, but to create a connection, to bring what has been forgotten a little closer to consciousness, little by little, in a way you can receive. Jung expressed this with profound clarity. The dream is a little hidden door in the innermost and most secret recesses of the soul. That door does not open through effort, but through gentle attention, through your willingness to listen without rushing to explain. In modern life, where everything must be quick, clear, and conclusive, dreams become one of the few spaces you cannot fully control, and perhaps that is exactly why many people choose to ignore them. You may wake up, check your phone, rush into work, and the dream dissolves as if it never existed. But that does not mean it was not working, because the process a dream carries out does not depend on whether or not you remember it. Try seeing it another way, as a self-regulating system within you. When one part of your conscious life is pushed too far, the unconscious will try to bring back the opposite to restore balance. If you have become too rational, too controlled, a dream may bring absurd images, powerful emotions, or situations that make no sense. If you have been too accommodating to others, a dream may place you in scenes where you say no, or walk away, or act in ways you have never allowed yourself to act in waking life. When a woman spends the whole day taking care of others, working efficiently, keeping everything stable, and, in her dreams, constantly getting lost, running late, or unable to find where she needs to go, those dreams may feel unsettling if viewed logically, but through Jung's lens, they reflect an inner disconnection. A part of her no longer knows where she is going, or no longer feels she belongs on the path she is walking. In that way, dreams do not merely reflect, they also restructure. They connect new experiences with old memories, place unfinished emotions into a context where they can be processed, and, most importantly, do so without the direct intervention of the will. You do not need to try to heal in a dream, because a part of you is already doing that, quietly and patiently. Imagine there is a gardener within you. During the day, you are busy with surface-level tasks. Still, at night, when you rest, that gardener begins to work, trimming what has grown too tangled, reconnecting what has been separated, tending to the places you no longer notice. When you wake, the garden may not be perfect at once, but it has changed a little toward greater balance, toward more life. You do not need to turn dreams into a puzzle to solve, but perhaps what you can do is begin to see them as part of yourself, not as something foreign, but as another voice, slower, deeper, and sometimes more honest, than your daytime thoughts. And if you allow yourself to listen in that way, you may begin to realize that dreams are not just images passing through the night, but a healing process unfolding little by little, even when you do not notice. As if some part of you is still trying to guide you back toward the wholeness you once had. The next part will touch something you may still be avoiding, even when everything becomes quiet. And it may change the way you look at silence itself. 4. Silence is the condition that allows transformation to happen. There are changes within you that have only just begun, very subtle and hard to name. You only feel that you no longer want to keep living the old way, but you do not yet truly know where you want to go. And in that unclear state, a familiar feeling appears. You want to speak about it. You want to share it with someone, as if to make sure what you are feeling is real, meaningful, as if to confirm that what you are sensing is right, is real. You may feel the need to share it immediately, even before you fully understand it, as if speaking it aloud will help you hold on to it, make it clearer, make it more certain. But there is something very subtle that many people do not realize, and that is that not every change needs to be spoken right away, and not everything beginning to grow within you is strong enough to step into the light too soon. In the depth of Carl Jung's thought, inner transformation does not unfold in a loud or rapid way, but very quietly, very privately, like a restructuring from within, where new insights begin to form, yet still have no clear shape, no precise language to express them. And if you rush to bring them outside, you may unintentionally force them into forms they are not yet ready to carry. On a business trip, I happened to run into Iris, an old friend I had not had the chance to talk with in a long time. Iris had lived for years in what she called a stable life, a good job, a long-term relationship, everything reasonable. But when she opened up to me, she said there had always been a faint feeling that she was not truly in the right place. And one evening, after a stretch of exhausting days, she realized more clearly than ever that she no longer wanted to keep going like that. That feeling was not loud, not dramatic. It was simply a very quiet clarity. But the very next day, Iris told her friends about it. She said she wanted to change, that she felt she was no longer herself, and the responses she received were painfully familiar. Some said she was overthinking. Some told her she should be grateful for what she had. Some laughed softly and said everyone goes through moments like that. And even though no one meant to hurt her, those reactions began planting a very small doubt in her, but enough to shake what she had just recognized. When Iris told this story, she did not say other people were wrong. She said she had shared too soon, when what was forming within her was still too tender, too easily influenced. And from Jung's perspective, this makes perfect sense, because in the early stages of individuation, new insights are often not yet fully integrated into consciousness. They exist as scattered fragments, feelings that have not yet been named, and if they are exposed too early, they are easily interpreted through someone else's lens rather than the truth inside you. A deeply perceptive thought in Jung's system was expressed this way: your visions will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. This does not only speak about turning inward, but also suggests that clarity does not come from speaking too soon, but from staying with your experience long enough, being silent long enough for it to take shape, being patient enough for it to root itself. In modern life, where everything is shared, posted, and responded to almost immediately, silence can feel unfamiliar, even uncomfortable. You may be used to the idea that when you realize something important, you want to write it down, say it aloud, post it, or at least tell someone. because outside feedback gives you a sense of certainty, a sense that what you just experienced is real, but that very thing can sometimes interrupt the deeper process unfolding within you. Silence, in this case, is not avoidance, nor is it fear of being judged, but a deeply mature act, a conscious choice to protect something that is still forming, just as you would not dig up a seed every day to check whether it has grown, because that very act would keep it from growing. Remember this: you do not need to turn your inner experience into a story right away, because not everything needs to be understood immediately. Some things need to be lived through, felt, and left undisturbed until they become a true part of you, not just an idea, but a change in the way you see, the way you choose, the way you are present. And when that happens, you will no longer feel the need to speak about it, not because you are hiding, but because you know real transformation does not need proof. It shows itself through the way you live, through a new calmness in old situations, through different choices that need no explanation, and through a very clear feeling that you are closer to yourself. Perhaps you do not need to do anything more right now. Just keep something that is still very new within you, very quiet, very true, and let it remain there, without rushing, without pressure, as something that belongs only to you, at least for now. The next part may make you look at your familiar roles in a completely different way, but perhaps you will want to discover that for yourself. 5. The social mask and the need for recognition. The version of yourself that you present to the outside world often works very well. It helps you be respected, trusted, and appreciated. It allows everything to run smoothly, and in Carl Jung's view, this part has a very clear name: the persona, or the social mask, the image you build to step into the world, to fit in, to connect, to avoid being excluded. Persona is not something bad. In fact, it is necessary, because no one can live without adjusting to their environment. You learned that very early on, perhaps noticing that when you were more obedient, you were loved more. When you were more capable, you were recognized more. When you were stronger, you were respected more. And very naturally, you began to build a version of yourself that matched those responses, a version that knows how to control itself, how to adjust, how to be right at the right time, in the right way. Over time, that version becomes so familiar that you no longer recognize it as a choice and begin to believe it is your true self. And this is precisely the point Jung touched with great subtlety when he expressed the thought: the persona is a complicated system of relations between individual consciousness and society. It is not you, but the relationship between you and the world. And when you identify with it completely, you begin to lose the part of yourself that exists outside that relationship, the part that does not need to be seen to exist. In modern life, this is very clear, especially for women who are used to keeping everything together. You may be always professional at work, always kind in relationships, always strong when problems arise, always able to make others feel comfortable, and from the outside, you may be seen as stable, reliable, capable, and yet inside, there may be moments when you feel empty or strangely unfamiliar to yourself, as if you have become a very complete version of a person, but not yourself. But what is often left unspoken is this: when the persona becomes too strong, it not only helps you adapt, it also gradually takes over the space of consciousness. You begin to live through your roles more than through a direct experience of yourself. Your decisions are increasingly based on what is right, what is acceptable, rather than what is true for me. On a deeper level, this creates a very subtle inner misalignment. One part of you functions smoothly in the world, while another part, unnamed and unlived, gradually becomes unfamiliar. And it is this very separation that becomes the source of the emptiness many people cannot explain, not because they lack something outwardly, but because it has been too long since they touched the part inside that is not tied to any role at all. The issue here is not that you have done something wrong, because your persona has helped you achieve many things. Still, when your sense of worth begins to depend entirely on how others see you, every compliment becomes proof that I am okay. Every criticism, no matter how small, can become a threat to your identity, and this creates a very fragile state where you are always maintaining your image, not because you want to, but because you are afraid of losing it. You might recognize this in your own way when you feel the need to reply to messages in the right way, when you think very carefully before speaking your true thoughts, when you feel uncomfortable if others misunderstand you, or when you realize that some choices you make are not because you want to, still because you think, that's what I should do. And over time, these small things accumulate into a distance, very thin but very real, between the person you are living as and the person you are presenting. Recognizing this does not mean you must destroy all your roles. It does not mean you must stop working, stop caring, or stop adapting to the world. It simply means you begin to see clearly that persona is only a part, not the whole, that you can use it without becoming it, that you can step into a role without losing your essence. When you begin to notice that distance, very gently, without rushing, you may feel a small shift, as if you no longer need to hold the image all the time. You may allow yourself to be imperfect in certain moments. You may feel lighter when you no longer have to constantly prove your worth, and gradually you begin to return to a deeper part of yourself, a part that does not need recognition to exist. Perhaps you do not need to do anything right now. Only notice how much of your day comes from the role and how much comes from the real person, and you can begin, very gently, by no longer confusing the two. The next part may touch a deeper journey, where you not only realize that you are wearing a mask, but also begin to understand who you truly are without it. 6. Individuation, becoming yourself. When you begin to see the mask you have worn for too long, when you no longer confuse the role with the real person, a very natural question appears. If you are not all the things you have been showing outwardly, then who are you really? You do not need to answer that immediately, because this question does not need a quick answer. It is not a problem to solve, but a journey to walk. And in Carl Jung's world, that journey has a very clear name: individuation, the process through which a person gradually returns to themselves, not by becoming different to attract attention, but by becoming more real, more profound, and more whole. Individuation is not about leaving the world behind, nor is it a rebellion against everything you have once been. It does not require you to change everything in your life, but begins with something very simple and very difficult. You begin to look within yourself honestly, not only at the parts you are proud of, but also at the parts you have avoided, hidden away, and once believed should not exist in me. In that journey, you gradually realize that you are not made only of light, but also of darkness, not only of strengths, but also of fears, unnamed needs, and untouched wounds. And what makes this process different is not that you remove the imperfect parts, but that you begin to accept that they too are part of you. There is an image that may help you feel this more clearly. Imagine yourself as a mirror shattered into many pieces, each piece reflecting a part of you, some bright, some dark, some parts you are proud of, some you do not want to look at, and for a long time, you only choose to keep the beautiful pieces, while the others are pushed away, hidden, discarded. But that very selection is what makes your image incomplete, and individuation is the process of gathering back each piece, even the imperfect ones, to reassemble a fuller, truer image of yourself. A profound reflection within Jung's system is expressed as follows: the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. This is not simply an inspiring line, but a reminder that becoming yourself is not something automatic. It is a journey that requires courage, because you will have to pass through parts of yourself you once never dared to face. In modern life, this may appear in very concrete ways. You may be used to always being strong, but in this process, you begin to realize you also have moments of weakness, and instead of hiding them, you allow yourself to feel them without self-judgment. Or you may be someone who always tries to please others, but gradually, you begin to recognize your own needs, and you try setting a small boundary, not to fight anyone, but to stop abandoning yourself. This process is not loud. There is no single dramatic awakening in which everything changes at once. It unfolds very slowly, very quietly, through small choices, small realizations. Those moments when you pause before reacting in the old way and choose something different, something closer to the truth inside you. But there is also something very real you may feel in this journey, and that is a certain loneliness. Not because you must separate from everyone, but because there are steps no one can take for you, parts of yourself only you can see, decisions only you can take responsibility for, and at times you may feel as if you are standing between two worlds, no longer fully belonging to the old version of yourself, but not yet fully become the new one. You might feel uncertain at times, and that is part of the process, because when you no longer cling to the old image, you lose a familiar sense of safety. But it is precisely in that open space that something new has the chance to form, not based on other people's expectations, but on your own truth. The point of individuation is not to become perfect, but to become whole, because the more a person tries to show only the good, the right, the acceptable parts, the more they must push the rest down into the depths. And that splitting is the source of so many inner conflicts. But when you begin to allow both to exist, both light and shadow, both strength and vulnerability, you no longer have to divide yourself in two. And from there, you begin to feel a very different kind of freedom. Not freedom from problems, but freedom from pretending. You do not need to move quickly in this journey. You do not need to become yourself overnight, because that does not happen in a single night, but through many moments in which you choose to remain with your truth instead of chasing the image you think you should be. Perhaps right now, you only need to hold on to one very small thing. This journey is yours. No one can define it for you. No one can live it for you. And even if it may not be easy, it is still the only path that leads you back to yourself. The next part will touch something very subtle about the way real change begins to show itself outwardly. But perhaps you will want to feel it for yourself rather than hear it in advance. 7. Let the results of transformation prove themselves. When something inside you truly changes, you will realize that it does not arrive through a loud moment or a big decision, but through very small shifts in the way you live. And over time, those small things begin to speak for you without any explanation at all. You no longer feel the need to tell anyone what you have come to understand. what you have let go of, because the way you respond, the way you choose, and the way you are present quietly reflect everything. Perhaps you have been in a different stage when you had just had a new realization and immediately wanted to share it, to speak it aloud, to hold on to the feeling, to have others acknowledge that what you were going through was real. This is entirely natural because, at the level of consciousness, human beings always seek confirmation to strengthen an experience. In the depth of Carl Jung's thought, transformation does not lie in what you say about yourself, but in the way your psychological structure is gradually rearranged from within. A reflection often mentioned as a very clear guide says, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." And that means declarations do not define your nature, but by the way you live in very ordinary moments. Look a little more closely, because this does not happen in the way you think. A person who once became angry easily does not need to say they have learned emotional control. You will see it when they pause before reacting, when familiar triggers no longer sweep them away. A person who has always tried to please others does not need to declare that they have learned to set boundaries. You will see it when they can say no without feeling guilty. A person who once depended on praise does not need to explain that they have changed. You will notice it when they are no longer shaken so strongly by the way others look at them. These changes do not need to be announced, and yet they are very clear, not through words, but through the energy of a life being lived. But there is a deeper level you may not yet have noticed. What happens when you no longer need other people to know that you have changed? This is where the process of growth becomes more grounded, because when you still need recognition, part of you is still depending on the outside world to define your value. But when that need gradually disappears, you begin building an inner center, a place where you know who you are without anyone having to confirm it. Like a seed planted in the ground, in the beginning, you do not see anything changing on the surface. But underneath, the roots are quietly growing. If you keep digging it up to check, you will interrupt the very process itself. But if you leave it in silence, in darkness, it will take root on its own, and in time, it will rise on its own, without needing to announce itself, without needing to prove anything. You may not realize it, but the process inside you is unfolding in the same way. In modern life, where everything is shared, posted, and spoken about immediately, keeping silent may make you feel as if you are missing something. But in truth, that silence is the very space needed for change to become real. Not silence out of fear, but silence because you understand that some things need time to mature before they can be seen. When your inner world is restructured, it will naturally express itself in your life, without force, without effort. You do not need to say who you have become, because the way you live will answer for you. And in that state, silence is no longer avoidance, but the sign of an inner strength steady enough not to need proof. Because when you no longer need to talk about it, no longer need to prove it, you begin to live with it. And when you live with it long enough, it becomes part of you, without effort, without strain, without explanation. And at that point, you will realize that you do not need to say who you have become, because the way you live has already answered on your behalf. What you have just moved through does not lie in each separate concept, but in the way they all connect into a very deep journey within you. Night is no longer only a time to rest, but a space in which the unconscious opens. Sleep is not only for restoring the body, but the time when what you have not yet faced begins to be rearranged. Dreams are not random images, but the subtle language of the soul. And silence is not emptiness, but the condition that allows real transformation to happen. Seen as a whole, the spirit of Carl Jung is very clear here. What you reject does not disappear. It simply enters the dark and continues to influence you until you are ready enough to see it and integrate it. Growth is not about becoming more perfect, but more whole, when you dare to step into both the light and the shadow within yourself. And perhaps the most important message you can keep is this: allow this process to unfold privately, slowly, without needing to prove anything. Go to sleep, listen, and keep to yourself what is changing within you. If you feel touched by this, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe, so you do not miss the journeys ahead, because perhaps the deeper part of you has only just begun to awaken.